Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Olivia Carr Edenfield for letting me present via Zoom. I know that it is against what ALA would like to create, so I really appreciate being allowed to participate nonetheless. I'd also like to thank Emily for being so accommodating and for going out of her way to organize this recording. I'm so grateful for your support and kindness, Emily. I really appreciate it. I'm very sad not to attend ALA this year. I really would have loved to have been able to listen to all the exciting papers in the program and to catch up with you all. So believe me, this is not my preferred choice of presentation either. So thank you for bearing with me. Okay, so my paper today is entitled The Age of Influence, Edith Wharton's Stories on Instagram Stories. In 2021, the actor Timothy Chalamet posted a picture of Edith Wharton's The House of Mirth to his Instagram stories. Fans began to speculate over whether Chalamet would be appearing in a new film based on the book, and indeed whether he would be better off as Lawrence Selden or Ned Silverton. Chalamet's casual photograph launched 1,000 reading lists, such as this one by the Goodreads and Instagram user Reading Timmy, who also includes links to buy the books mentioned by Chalamet on social media and in interviews. Fans also noticed that Chalamet's novel was heavily bookmarked and speculated endlessly on Instagram and Reddit, as fans do, over whether the actor had read the novel on the recommendation of his sister, the actor and influencer Pauline Chalamet. According to an interview with Nylon Mag on her Instagram profile, Pauline Chalamet reads one book every week. So she's living the dream. She's part of a cohort of influencers on Bookstagram, BookTok, or LitTalk, who recommend literature to their very many followers, 353,000 in Pauline Chalamet's case. Chalamet often uses simple lists like the ones you can see here, which include more contemporary literature as well as classics by Hemingway and Victor Hugo. However, for the most part, literary influencers on BookTok and the Instagram equivalent Bookstagram use short, colourful clips, emojis, and overlaid soundtracks from popular music. So last time I checked, the hashtag BookTok appears 43.8 million times on TikTok and Bookstagram 7.4 million times on Instagram. So this is a cultural phenomenon, an online literary community in which content creators make videos on book hauls, bookcase aesthetics, visceral reactions to book endings, and book recommendations and reviews. Book talkers and bookstagrammers, as they are known, discuss books across genre, but predominantly YA or young adult fiction, fantasy, and romance. They are, for the most part, young women and teenagers, and it is perhaps unsurprising, therefore, that highbrow culture finds it easy to scoff at the style of book talkers. But social media not only fosters communities and gives a voice to those outside academia to speak about books, it also seems to have a real influence on the literary world, particularly in publishing, one that is hard to ignore. Many Barnes and Noble have Book Talk displays in their stores, and they feature a section on their website entitled Book Talk Books. On the Waterstones website, so the UK equivalent of Barnes and Noble, they also have a section entitled Book Talk Reads, which states, as you can see here, Book Talk has revolutionized the way many of us consume literature, with armies of passionate content creators whose judgments can make or break a book, author, or even entire genre. The community has played a huge part in the success of many authors. Booksellers have noticed that Book Talk has a real impact on the publishing industry. Books that have been recommended by popular book talkers having an influence on book sales. By 2024, publishers had begun to send books to popular content creators to promote, excuse me, to promote newly published titles and boost sales. So Book Talk also has an effect on how we consume classic literature. In 2024, Fyodor Dostoevsky's White Nights became the fourth most sold work of literature in translation in the United Kingdom. The 1848 short story had been all over Book Talk since December 2023, with a proliferation of reviews, inspirational quotes, and carefully curated pictures of the Penguin Classics Little Black Book edition, next to cups of coffee and aesthetically placed roses. On Spotify, one can find playlists You can listen to these while reading the book. They include Tchaikovsky and Shostakovich, alongside Jeff Buckley and the Smiths. The social network Reddit is torn over whether this newfound success for the 19th century Russian author is a positive thing or not. While Working Shame 7712 expresses his hatred for the TikTokification of literature and philosophy for false and shallow intellectualism, One Spread 5081 disagrees. I don't think it's a bad thing. If a book, an idea, or whatever is going viral, it doesn't lose its value, right? Vincent van Gogh, for example, his Starry Night suddenly became everywhere, and then some people started to get interested in art more. Maybe it's just a way to make people like things that are actually good, rather than some weird dances or inappropriate songs. So, what is the TikTokification of literature, and is it indeed too shallow to be of interest? To what extent was Wharton herself interested in the popularization of her literary output? Could I continue the important work of Timothy Chalamet and harness the power of BookTok or Bookstagram to introduce Edith Wharton to an even larger field of young readers? Would social media influencers help me in this task? Could Wharton indeed be the next Dostoevsky and go viral? I decided to contact influencers in an attempt to persuade them to read a Wharton book and review it in their Instagram stories. So the first step in my foray into the culture of literary social media was to scope out TikTok. Like every other millennial, I already had an ill-used Instagram account, but had a feeling that TikTok was where the real literary criticism could be found. Perusing accounts, Edith Wharton didn't seem to be particularly big on first searching TikTok, with a few videos to be found, most of which were citations or sequences of photographs to soundtracks like Radiohead's No Surprises. I managed to find some reviews, recommendations, and skits about Wharton's writing, but the world of TikTok needed a Whartonian boost. The next step was to choose which Wharton book to try to make viral. One of the reasons given by The Guardian for the popularity of Dostoevsky's White Nights is its length. At just over 80 pages long, the story was well suited to a generation affected by a lack of concentration and the need for instant gratification. So I decided to stick to the little black book format, which meant I needed to choose between Mrs. Manstey's View, published in 1891, and The Reckoning from August 1902. Mrs. Manstey's View is, as we know, a devastating tale of an elderly woman who is at risk of losing her greatest pleasure in life, the view of the garden outside her window. So she turns to arson to protect it from the neighbour's extension. She succumbs to pneumonia after her failed attempt and dies on the morning the builders begin. The Reckoning is the story of a marriage, of divorce, and of personal freedom. The perfect story, perhaps, for a generation that seemed to be, sometimes, tired of the conventional colour scheme, much like the Van Sideren set. So I love both stories, and unable to choose, I decided to look at reviews on Goodreads to see which one was preferred by readers already. The Reckoning had 918 ratings and 127 reviews, with 3.65 stars out of 5. Reviews were predominantly positive, with 41% of reviewers giving 4 stars, including this one from 2019, which channels share. Love is one of the most intense and beautiful things we can experience, but the hook is that more often than not, there is a life after love. Edith Wharton is a master in portraying the loneliness and confusion that comes with experiencing that. The story only got 2 one-star reviews, including this one on the right, which reads, devastatingly, Wharton style perhaps, could not care less. Mrs. Manstey's View had a higher overall score with 3.83 out of 5, but with only 99 ratings and 21 reviews. One review called it a slog to get through even at only 20 pages. Might the story's focus on an older woman turn off potential Gen Z readers? I had to think which story would be most attractive to the classic BookTok audience, that being young women. A story about an older woman who sets fire to her neighbour's house extension when it threatens her view? Powerful. But a story about new ideas of marriage that correspond to and complicate many contemporary marriages where couples check in on each other's feelings? Perhaps more relevant to Generation Z. The Reckoning it was then. The title would also, I decided, look more intriguing as a hashtag. So I decided to contact Book Talk influencers directly, asking them to buy the book, read it, and review it. I didn't think I could persuade my university to send out books to influencers in the name of this particular research. And I also didn't want the project to feel too grubby through any monetary bribery. The influencers would need to advertise the book based on their own love for it. Would it work? Probably not. Was it an idea worth a try? Why not? After all, the air of ideas is the only air worth breathing. I decided that no book talker would trust a newly founded TikTok with no followers, so I decided to revert back to Instagram, where I have an old page on historical queer women with around 3,500 followers. Although I hadn't posted in several years, these followers and my many past posts gave me some sort of social media legitimacy. Non-legitimate profiles wouldn't make it through the DMs. I then formulated a message. I thought it best to be awkwardly honest. Hello there. I hope you're well. My name's Hannah, and I'm a researcher of American literature who wants to promote the works of Edith Wharton. I ask not for any other reason than the desire to see Wharton get the credit she deserves. There's a Penguin Classics Little Black Book edition, just like Dostoevsky's White Nights. I hope you like it. So far, so millennial uncool, but I determined to channel my best Undine Spragg and climb the dizzying heights of Bookstagram influencing nonetheless. I contacted 40 Bookstagrammers, sending a message to all those who had posted a picture of White Nights, with the logic that if they can buy a Penguin Classics Little Black Book edition once, then they can do it again. A few replied straight away, keen to read this story. Half of these were English literature students, and one had read and loved Wharton's work before. Rav's Library wrote, Hi, I'm glad to know that you're promoting Wharton's works. I fully agree that she's a very underrated author and deserves so much more credit. I have read 3 of her books and even wrote a paper on The Age of Innocence and The House of Mirth film adaptations, and I will definitely be checking out the short story you recommended. Overall, I had about 10 influencers, get back to me with the promise that they would read the book and post the story. I also received a few replies in the negative. A large number of Bookstagrammers were from India, where the book has not been released yet by Penguin. Another person was, perhaps quite rightly, suspicious of my motives. Some influencers were too busy with their own academic projects. And as time went on, I worried more and more about my conviction not to send out free books to the Bookstagrammers. One of the pros of Bookstagram was indeed the fact that it was getting people to buy books, so why should I not include myself in that? One Bookstagrammer replied to me that it was problematic to her not to read paper versions of books and that she didn't want to buy it herself, so I should send it to her. And she added that she didn't want to read an online version either, and I asked her what she prefers about paper versions of books. The answer was unsurprising. She says, paper copies are comfortable to read. Digital copies I feel bored with as it doesn't feel like reading. So Rhea Bookaholic, as she is called in her profile, is of course right. There is nothing nicer than cozying up with a real book. It is, I'm sure, no coincidence that Bookstagram really launched in 2020 during the COVID pandemic, when readers worldwide were searching for comfort in dark times. But while I also believe in buying books, of course, it's my job, I needed to remind myself that I could not afford to buy copies of The Reckoning and ship them internationally to 40 different unknowns. Only one Bookstagrammer managed to read the book and offer a review of it, Coffee and Classics, who sent me this very nice message on the first day. She told me that she enjoyed the story. Sorry. She then went on to post a series of luscious pictures on Instagram, which you can see here, with a review and, of course, the appropriate hashtags. It was a joy to read her online community engage with the post and to be inspired by the books, to read the books themselves. Here we go. So I love the bottom right exchange in particular with another influencer I cited earlier, Rath's Library, writing, I loved it more than I thought I would. Wharton's works deserve more recognition. Coffee and Classics replies, absolutely a brilliant short story that will boggle you for days. I went on to ask Coffee and Classics in her direct messages what she liked about Bookstagram, what it gave her. And her answer was heartwarming, and I'll leave it up there for you to read. As for Wharton, what would she have thought of the bookstagramification of her writing? Would she have been pleased that her stories continue to boggle new reviewers who express their thoughts in such a format so far from Wharton's world? Well, of course, that's impossible to say. She was, after all, in her own words, born into a world in which telephones, motors, and electric light were not only unknown but still mostly unforeseen. That's from A Backward Glance, of course, pages 67. But the writer was, as we know, not opposed to modernity. She loved her motor car, had electricity and central heating, and used the telephone. Scott Marshall points out in Edith Wharton on Film and Television, A History in Filmography, however, that she was never able, and here I'm quoting, never able to come to terms with the motion picture, or the cinema as she called it, aesthetically. Marshall's claim that Wharton disliked this medium allows one to conclude that she would not have been an avid fan of the Bookstagram video clip, but this is neither here nor there. What is important, of course, and this is something that publishers have already picked up on elsewhere, is the spreading of Edith Wharton's work through whatever format necessary, in the hopes that someone somewhere will pick up the book, read it, and love it. That they will, to cite Coffee and Classics again, be able to go back again to the art of physical books and reading in this era of gadgets and gizmos. Maybe even eat some aesthetically pleasing pancakes as they do so. And perhaps that one day that new generation of readers might even join the Edith Wharton Society. Thank you very much.